we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
What a week in LGBT news. We say it almost every week, but
we got new news in the last 30 seconds.
This past week, Pennsylvania's ban on same-sex marriage was struck down in the courts.
And that decision relied on a decision the day before in Oregon where the marriage ban was struck down in the courts.
And in Utah, where about 1,300 couples got married, a judge ordered the state to recognize the marriages.
And it won't be news to you because it'll be a couple days later, but literally as we were sitting here preparing to start the show, we got the announcement that suit has been filed in Montana for marriage, leaving one state without a lawsuit.
A new study says bad smells make people more anti-gay.
I wanted to skip that story, but Andy insists on doing it. In another survey, most Americans say that they are just fine if we elect a gay or lesbian president.
The federal government has recommended that hundreds of thousands of those of us at risk for HIV take a daily dose of Truvada.
And
big story.
Yes, it is a big story. And Larry Kramer's searing drama, The Normal Heart, is going to start airing on HBO this Sunday.
And we will remind you that coming up, we're going into, if those of you who watch us on Free Speech TV, they're going into pledge mode from June 2nd through June 15th. So during that time, the show will premiere on, these are Eastern times, Friday at 10, then Saturday at 11, and Sunday at 4 p.m.
Write to Andy Hum at andyhum@aol.com for those to get on our email list so you can get the details, or check the free speech schedule online. Yes, but once again, it's marriage all over the news. And the most recent big decision by 24 hours was Pennsylvania.
This is federal judge John Jones III. He struck down Pennsylvania's ban on same-sex marriage. This wasn't a constitutional ban, it was a law. And he based his decision on equal protection and due process in the 14th Amendment. And he entered the order permanently enjoining enforcement of the ban, and also immediately recognized those who were married elsewhere.
He is a judge whose name was put forward in the first place by former Senator Rick Santorum. And he was officially nominated by President George W. Bush. So it's really quite satisfying to have judges across the political spectrum nominated by every president in the last, 30 or 40 years making these decisions.
This is the same, assumedly, Republican judge who struck down the law in Dover, Pennsylvania about 3 years ago, which mandated the teaching of creationism alongside evolution. And when he has to go out to speak, sometimes he needs a security guard with him because of people's strong feelings on that subject.
Now, we have maintained all along that in the legal realm of how you make these decisions and whether LGBT people are a suspect class, which doesn't mean that people should look at us askance, but that we've been so discriminated against that any law that affects us should be looked at with suspicion, that there is no rational basis for discriminating against us legally or any other way, and that should be a baseline assessment. But they have all these different levels, and the Pennsylvania judge says that even if you apply heightened scrutiny and you make it a higher bar for these laws to pass, I'm sorry, I've got that reversed.
Rational basis.
Rational basis is actually the higher bar because it would allow a law that, a higher bar for us to pass.
I see. That's right.
It's unnecessarily complicated. At any rate, he applied the heightened
What he's
scrutiny
trying to say is
basis.
there's no damn good reason to not let these people get married.
In fact, what he said in the last line of his decision is, "We are a better people than what these laws represent, and it is time to discard them into the ash heap of history."
Wow. He also acknowledged that it's controversial still, what he's doing for a lot of people. And he says, quote, "That same-sex marriage causes discomfort in some does not make its prohibition constitutional, nor can past tradition trump the bedrock constitutional guarantees." This was a case that was, and he compared the ban on same-sex marriage to segregation laws.
Yep.
And this was a case brought by the ACLU.
Well, this is the whole point of these lawsuits, for judges to say, look, you can pass all the laws you want, but if the laws are unconstitutional, they cannot stand. And the right wing saying, well, you're overriding the will of the people. Well, if the will of the people is discriminatory and illegal, that's what judges are for.
My friend Ann Northrup was saying this 15 years ago on this show.
I doubt I was the only one, but I do take some satisfaction in that.
Let's show. Should we show a little bit of what's...
The first couple married in Pennsylvania, first couple to get a marriage license, because what happened was that once this decision came down, people could immediately go apply for a marriage license. And so they went in droves to the various bureaus to apply for marriage licenses.
So the picture we have is of Rue Landau and Carrie Smith, actually. We don't have that picture? Maybe we do. First marriage
Two
cases.
Women who,
there they are.
Okay.
This was on Instagram, folks.
But our friend Sean Strube, the great legendary AIDS activist, lives in Pennsylvania, and he and his partner Xavier went to their local county clerk to apply for a marriage license, and they were rejected. The county clerk looked at this application and said, oh, no, the law is against that. And they said, excuse me, the law has just been struck down by this judge. Here's the opinion. And she looked at them and said, oh, that's just one judge's opinion. Just one judge's opinion.
Well, you know, Pennsylvania is a tough state. This is a state that has not been able to get a state LGBT rights law passed.
It's a very conservative state in many ways,
yeah,
especially
I mean,
outside of Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, but
But Sean talked about, he told this story, and he talked about how painful this was for him and how angering, and how he was surprised at how angry he was, because he's never been a big advocate of marriage, and yet he was enraged by this rejection. And
we'll get to that in the normal heart. Your anger is good.
Well, to me, the point is again the lesson that all of this is not just about marriage and benefits. All of this is simply a vehicle to full citizenship. And when someone rejects you like that, they're telling you you're not good enough, you're not a full citizen.
And it's also one of those institutions where if you want it, you have to come out. You have to come out and present yourselves and sign up publicly.
Certainly.
And all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
This is why Jim Nabors finally did it, for God's sakes. Now, Mark Siegel, who's the veteran activist down there in Philadelphia and publisher of the Philadelphia Gay News, he got himself sworn in to assist with the marriages as a registrar. We can now marry in 18 states plus the District of Columbia. In 11 more states, judges have overturned bans or ordered recognition of out-of-state marriages. You know,
it's hard to keep track of this. As we say, it's changing every minute at this point. And if you go to freedomtomarry.org, the website of Evan Wolfson's organization, you can try to keep up with. There are 70 lawsuits now in states across the nation, in every state except North Dakota. That's the outlier.
Some of these are being brought by private attorneys on behalf of their clients.
Well, the lawsuit just filed in Montana is by the ACLU with 4 couples. There had been a previous attempt to do civil unions, but now with all this tsunami of wins, they're going for full marriage.
So when is the other side just going to say, uncle?
Well, I mean, here's why they won't. Because they raise money on us. It's all about raising money, always.
That's a fool's errand. I think the Republicans who want to run for president in 2016 are really relieved about this, because it could remove it as an issue. They'll still condemn it. They'll call it judicial activism and all that stuff. But people won't care as much because it'll be the law.
Well, the only thing about 2016 is by that point, not that anyone may pay attention to this, but that may be just when it's at the Supreme Court.
We're hoping for 2015, aren't we?
Well, but once they take it, then they take time to get briefed and all of that. So the decision could come anytime.
Well, they're not taking any time in Oregon, and sorry for putting you second place here because your decision came through on Monday. It's old news. The judge there was Michael McShane, who was out gay. He wrote it, and he said, "I believe we can look at if we could just look at gender and sexuality, we can see in these plaintiffs if we can look past gender and sexuality, we can see in these plaintiffs nothing more or less than our own families." Now, this is a case that the National Organization for Marriage, the right-wing group, sought to intervene. McShane said no, and an appeals court rebuffed them, but they're still trying to get in.
They are still trying to get in, and they have appealed beyond that. But because the governor and the attorney general in Oregon have announced they're not opposing this, they're not appealing it, they're not doing anything, we're still waiting to hear whether the governor of Pennsylvania is going to appeal that one. Marriage is legal in Oregon now and is not under a stay order and is going ahead.
And if we can bring the picture up, there was great jubilation.
I love this picture.
There in Oregon, if we can get that picture up there, which is the one you tried to put up. There it is. Look how happy everybody is.
People cheering, people kissing, people, great jubilation.
This is a state that had a constitutional ban on same-sex marriage, and now it doesn't have to have a repeal vote, which they were planning. And the right wing has already dropped their religious liberty referendum thing because they didn't like the way the state phrased it.
There has been a long, long fight for many, many years in Oregon over gay rights, and they've gone back and forth, and this is a huge, huge triumph.
And in Oregon, Multnomah County, where Portland is, immediately issued licenses, and they waived the 3-day wait that they have there.
And again, the judge had an eloquent closing sentence to his decision. Let us look less to the sky to see what might fall. Rather, let us look to each other and rise.
Absolutely.
All right.
He also cited Oregon's recognition of things like marriages of convenience, quickie marriages from Vegas, but not gay and lesbian loving couples, he said. Okay.
All right. In Utah, a federal court has said that the state must recognize the couples who have married there.
1,300 of them.
But in terms of whether the marriages will go forward, the stay is still in place, and there's a state appeal. But the state was screwing around with those who were already married in terms of adoptions and things, and so the court stepped in and said, hey, wait a minute, you have to acknowledge these people who are already married.
Now, this court order about the 1,300 marriages that already have taken place, that does not go into effect for 21 days from the order, which was earlier this week.
Interesting decision by the Defense Department. We have told you about this case of a woman in North Carolina, Tracy Dice Johnson, whose wife, they were married in D.C., Donna Johnson.
They're both in the National Guard.
Donna was killed in Afghanistan in 2012. Yes, October 2012, before the DOMA decision. So, nonetheless, Tracy applied for death benefits because they were legally married and was at first rejected. And now the Defense Department says that Tracy will get full death benefits retroactive to Donna's death. And what's important about this is that the Defense Department and the Veterans Affairs Bureau or whatever had been screwing around with whether they were going to acknowledge people in cases like this by their place of celebration of the marriage or place of residence. And they lived in North Carolina, which doesn't acknowledge same-sex marriage.
It's tough to do for military. They move them around so much.
Exactly. So this is a breakthrough where the Defense Department has now said, all right, we are going to recognize all legal marriages no matter where you live for these death benefits, and we're even going to go back before the DOMA decision.
Well, for those of you who did your taxes this year, if you have been married for several years, you are allowed to go back 3 years, which would also be before the DOMA decision.
In Arkansas, there was some confusion because when the judge legalized same-sex marriage,
Piazza.
He forgot something in his decision, which actually prevented some marriages from taking place. So he went back and fixed that to make it all clean.
And he also refused to stay his own order, and the couples, were able to get married there. But the state Supreme Court stayed on May 16th the county judge's May 9th marriage equality order.
So there are a lot of states now where marriage has been legalized for same-sex couples by state and federal judges, but overturning of the laws is on hold while those cases go up to the Court of Appeals.
Let's summarize a little bit. 40% of us now live in marriage equality states. It's Montana and North Dakota that didn't have them. Now Montana does. So it's just North Dakota that doesn't have a case.
I'm not sure whether South Dakota's has been filed.
5 federal appeals courts are presiding over 10 marriage equality cases in the coming weeks and months. The rulings are expected soon in Utah and Oklahoma in one district.
That's the 10th.
And the Virginia cases in the 4th at the appeals level. Now, the Supreme Court often waits for a conflict in appeals court rulings before they take a case.
That could be in the Fifth Circuit.
That might not happen.
It's true.
It might not happen.
But what may happen...
They just might let all the appeals courts play off, and they don't have to do anything, do they?
It's possible, but I think what's more likely is that you'll have a decision at an appeals court, and then someone will have enough standing, a governor or someone, to appeal that to the Supreme Court. And even though there may not be a conflict, the court could decide to take the case.
Well, in the Ninth Circuit, which is out in the west there, they stayed the Idaho ruling, and they've set an expedited appeal in that case, where we won in Idaho. They say they stayed it solely because the U.S. Supreme Court has instructed courts of appeals, per the Utah case, to grant stays in these circumstances. And they say it's going to be very difficult for Idaho. This is what the court's saying in granting the stay. It's going to be very difficult for Idaho for the appellants to make a strong showing in the case, and a showing that, and they're also very concerned about the harm being caused to the plaintiffs.
Look.
But they're not doing it. Expedited means September 8th, folks.
In 1996, the Congress passed the Defense of Marriage Act and said the federal government will not recognize any same-sex marriages, which weren't legal until 2004. We just celebrated the 10th anniversary of Massachusetts.
Happy anniversary,
legalizing
Massachusetts.
Marriage. And states don't have to recognize each other's marriages if they do this. Then in 2004, the Bush administration got reelected by having states pass all these constitutional amendments, having those on the ballots. And that was the thrust, that was the momentum. Shut them down, don't let them do this. And since then, the tide has turned, and especially with the Edie Windsor DOMA case, when the Supreme Court laid out the reasoning that you can pass all these laws that you want, but they are unconstitutional because you are singling out a group of people that you hate and trying to suppress them, and that is against the Constitution, then everything has gone the exact other way.
Don't forget, we live in New York, where we lost. We won at the trial level on a marriage case, and then lost at our high court in New York.
Pre-Windsor.
They did not accept those arguments.
Pre-Windsor.
Florida has a suit that goes to the Miami-Dade Circuit Court on July the 2nd under Judge Sarah Zabel.
Watch for a decision soon there.
Now, in Maine, the Maine Ethics Commission there recommended a $50,000 fine for the National Organization for Marriage for failing to register and disclose its activities in the 2009 same-sex marriage referendum, which we lost.
Well, yes, it was that one, and then we went on and won the next one.
They did a lot of good hard work there in Maine.
Well, this is Fred Karger, who has been following the National Organization for Marriage around the country and demanding that they release the names of their donors. Because what they do is they say to their donors, look, You donate to us, we will launder your donation, use your money for these things without having to disclose your name. And then they go into a state and they use the money. But the state laws say that if you spend over like $5,000 on a campaign, you have to disclose the donors to that campaign. And NOM says, our donors didn't give for these campaigns. They just gave to us, and we decided to use it for these campaigns. But what's been uncovered in these investigations is the actual memorandum, the letters between NOM and their donors that say, give us money for this campaign, and we will use it, and we will conceal your name. And the ethics committees are saying, excuse me, you told them you were going to use it for this.
And these are religious people? They sound quite sinful.
Well, the key here is, and what we're hoping for, although I suspect NOM will find a way to wriggle around this for another 50 years, we want to know who the NOM donors are. And there are only 3 major donors who have given millions of dollars.
Does Freedom to Marry disclose all of its donors?
I assume so. I don't know the answer to any of this. But I can tell you that NOM has 3 major donors. I ran into Fred Karger this week.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you ran into one of the donors.
No, I ran into Fred Karger on the day that Maine made this decision. I congratulated him. I said, do you know who the 3 donors are? He said, no, I don't. That's the whole point. I'm trying to figure this out.
There's a new film out about his presidential campaign.
Yes, it's great.
He ran for president as a Republican, which he is.
Yep.
Now, speaking of religion, the Kansas City St.
Well, I'm sorry, I have one more
Sure.
footnote, because there's a similar decision in California where a court rejected NOM's request to keep its donor names private in relation to its campaign in favor of Prop 8. So they've lost in Maine, they've lost in California, but they're going to keep going in the courts.
But some people are still upholding standards. Kansas City St. Joseph Catholic Diocese forced a woman who married another woman to leave her job in the food pantry of St. Francis Xavier Church. Colleen Simon is the victim of this Catholic homophobia. She coordinated social ministries there. Her wife is the Reverend Donna Simon of the St. Mark's Lutheran Church. Never hid the marriage, but she got fired because it appeared in a story about them. Mm-hmm. And she refused to resign. She said, you're going to have to fire me.
Get Equal is working on this. They're holding a vigil outside the church, and they're collecting canned food in honor of the fact that Colleen ran the food pantry.
And if we can just hang on, all these polls of the millennials, 18 to 33, we've told you this a lot, are very, very high on equality and same-sex marriage and all this kind of stuff. But what struck me in the poll is that 26% of you are not registered to vote. And they actually asked people, how likely are you to vote in the 2014 election and in the 2016 election? And they already know they're going to basically skip over these very important midterm elections and hold on to vote for president. Voting for president is fairly useless because there are very few states in play. Voting 2014 is essential, folks. Put it on your calendars this November to vote.
Tell your friends, too. The reason we have to go through all these lawsuits is because we have these idiots in office who put these laws into place. We have got to stop this. It's costing us a lot of time and money to overturn what they're doing.
Brought to you by the Koch brothers.
There's in Michigan, the Liberty Counsel right-wing idiots filed a brief in the marriage case there, the appeal or whatever, saying that the state should not allow marriage because gay people are too diseased. It's the old
Where
argument.
have I heard that before?
Yeah. And the Williams Institute reports that between 100,000 and 150,000 couples have been married in the 10 years since it became legal. 15 to 25% of all same-sex couples in this country, more female than male. 20% of the married couples are in the South. They've gone elsewhere to get married and gone back to the South.
But what has it done to heterosexual marriage? That's what the other side is always saying.
Yeah, well, what has it
Nothing.
done? All right. In South Carolina, the Senate there, as hoped for and predicted, did restore the funds cut by the House for colleges that had assigned lesbian-themed books, mostly for voluntary reading. But they have stipulated that the money that they put back into the school is to be used for teaching the Constitution and other founding documents. Well, okay, let's do that. Let's teach the Constitution.
Well, we're trying to teach lessons about gay history this week with the unveiling of the Harvey Milk, not unveiling, but yeah, actually the dedication of the Harvey Milk stamp. If we can get a picture of it up there. It was, as we speak, it's supposed to be done tomorrow, so May 22nd at the White House. Harvey Milk's nephew, Stuart Milk, in attendance, along with Senator Tammy Baldwin, the great Representative John Lewis, our UN Ambassador Samantha Power, and the House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. In San Francisco, they're going to do a dedication ceremony on May the 28th. But I think on May 22nd, we can start getting these stamps, right?
Yes. Now, also present at the White House ceremony will be people from the Harvey Milk High School here in New York, where we used to work and teach. But the person not present at the stamp unveiling at the White House will be the president, unfortunately. I guess he's scheduled elsewhere. And there will be a demonstration outside asking him to sign the proposed executive order for non-discrimination in employment by federal contractors.
Oh, he's saving that for Pride Week.
And we say that every year.
I know.
And
I'm wrong, and I'm wrong every year.
At the San Francisco Post Office, Cleve Jones and Lance Black will be handing out postcards with pictures of Harvey on them to be, well, you could use the Harvey Milk stamp, but it's a letter stamp, so you'd be spending a few extra cents.
Oh, well.
But it's a picture of Harvey on the front, and the postcards are pre-addressed to the Sultan of Brunei, care of the Beverly Hills Hotel, with a message saying, change your laws or sell your hotels.
Well, you know, I'm just going to say this, that, you know, I mean, I support what's going on with boycotting Dorchester hotels. It turns out they also have union trouble with Unite Here, which is Cleve Jones's union.
Which blew the whistle on them.
Yeah, no, so I'm not against that. I just think we need to take, I mean, and then, look, I think the guy who heads the Dorchester hotels has done a bad PR job, but he does say a lot of other hotel chains are owned by Saudi Arabia and all these other countries that have these terrible laws.
No question. We should go after all of them and continue to go after our own government. I wonder
if I could keep the clothes I have on if I found out where they came from.
Well, that's the other thing. You know, I think we have to acknowledge that all of these things are complex and not try to be too pure. But I think we should hit targets of opportunity.
Read the Brunei code of how they're doing Sharia law, and you will not want to go to a Dorchester hotel.
Exactly. Now, I was outside a couple of major events this week in New York with my Queer Nation colleagues and other allies, handing out informational leaflets about the Employment Non-Discrimination Act and its
shortcomings.
Thank you. The fact that it does only cover employment, not public accommodations, not housing, not federal programs.
Lots of exemptions.
And the religious exemptions take us backwards. You know, I can understand an argument that argues for gradualism as opposed to a full bill, but I think it's time for a full bill. I think the zeitgeist has evolved to the point where we can push for that. And I think the religious exemptions in the current bill are dangerous and take us backwards.
Every human rights law has an exemption for certain kinds of religious practices, like we don't make the Catholic Church ordain women. It'd be nice if they did, though, wouldn't it?
Well, did you see this thing in the Netherlands? There's a proposal for a new law that would prevent religious schools from refusing to hire gay teachers or include gay students.
I mean, they shouldn't discriminate on that basis under the civil law. I mean, they shouldn't.
Well, some people are afraid if the Netherlands passes that, then the right wing will go back to, if you do, see, here they're coming after the churches.
Well, pretty soon we're going to have a gay president anyway, because the Pew poll says most Americans, 66%, say it wouldn't matter if a presidential candidate was gay or lesbian. 27% do say they would be less likely to support him or her, and 5% more likely. In 2007, though, it was 47% who said that they were less likely to vote for someone. So I guess they're starting to like us. They're really starting to like us.
Well, we'll see what they like about the Boston Pride Parade theme, Be Yourself, Change the World. Grand Marshal is Governor Deval Patrick.
And?
The Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. I think that's great. You know, one of the greatest things I ever saw was a workshop at a Creating Change conference run by the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, who did this whole thing about making condoms a communion wafer. A mass.
Sex is a form of communion, for sure.
Yeah. So
certainly more of a religious experience than I've had in many churches.
However, in San Francisco at the Sacred Heart Cathedral Prep, they removed the yearbook picture of Jessica Urbina in a tux. The students protested by all showing up to wearing ties to school, and the school reversed its policy.
These Catholic schools, kids, have a lot more guts than we used to have. When I was in Catholic school, we were afraid of the nuns.
Oh, you weren't.
I would say I got whacked around sometimes too.
Yeah.
Anyway, actually that was by a lay teacher, not by a nun. In Rochester, New York, they're going to extend transition-related health care to transgender and gender nonconforming municipal employees. That doesn't go into effect until January 1st.
In California, the Assembly has passed the Respect After Death Act so that transgender people who die can have their gender in which they live their life represented appropriately on their death certificate.
So the Michael Sam kiss on television, appropriate, inappropriate? They actually polled people on this. 47% said inappropriate and 36% appropriate, which goes to show, I mean, there's still a discomfort out there at some levels. Well,
alert the media.
No. But I mean, support for gay rights is very high and all that kind of stuff, even in southern states and things. So, you know.
I was criticized by a viewer who said I should not be saying that people find us icky, and thought I was referring to anal intercourse.
You're talking about kissing.
And I said to the viewer, thank you for reminding me to be explicit. What they find icky is kissing.
Yes. I mean,
that's what they see, and they don't like it.
I remember 40 years ago a study that was done on straight men, where if they watched two men having sex, they could get into the sex part, the genital sexuality part. They would actually turn away from the screen when the men started kissing. It was so disgusting to them.
Yeah.
The Utah Zoo says that the gay penguin couple are the best parents that they've ever seen.
A couple of TV notes. Tyra Banks is producing an 8-part series called Transamerica for VH1. It is going to be a reality show following the lives of 5 trans women in Chicago. And OWN, the Oprah network, was going to follow Michael Sam on the St. Louis Rams trying out for the team.
St. Louis?
St. Louis Rams.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think I said that, whatever, maybe not. And now they've canceled it because the team didn't like the idea and Michael Sam saw the wisdom of not doing it. And I think it would have been a bad idea to film that.
By the way, some of the groups out there seem to be putting out talking points and raising money off the fact that Michael Sam is in a state, Missouri, which doesn't have a gay rights law.
Right.
But St. Louis does, and he is protected. His rights are protected. And the NFL has a non-discrimination policy.
Yeah, but that's not a law, it's just a policy.
So we told you about Clay Aiken. He's the Democratic nominee for Congress in North Carolina. He was on the Today Show. He was asked by Savannah Guthrie about why he is downplaying his support for same-sex marriage and his status, being gay. She couldn't bring herself to say that. So Clay said, I'm not downplaying, but I'm upplaying things that are affecting people's lives. And that's not necessarily one of them. And I thought that was a really dumb, bad statement.
I would buy the first half, but not the second half.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Don't, I mean, come on.
There are gay people, Clay, whose lives are affected. And
you know,
all of ours.
he ought to do a better job of embracing his sexuality and say, hey, you know, that's all part of my who I am. I was poor when I was young. That's taught me a lot. Being gay has taught me a lot. You know, come on. He's way behind.
You should be a political consultant.
I have been, and I would be telling him to do it differently, even in North Carolina.
And I would say he's doing okay, but could do better. But he's also in this terrible race with this incumbent Republican woman who
what'd she go after him for? Just being a a TV star.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, so far that's helped him. In Georgia, the Southern Poverty Law Center is demanding that Valdosta State Prison give hormone therapy to a transgender prisoner, and says that stopping hormone therapy was against their own policy. She was put into solitary confinement for pretending to be a woman. Thank you, Georgia.
Well,
and pretty tortured there, too.
The transgender rights law has been signed in Maryland, protecting civil rights for transgender folks there, but they may face a referendum over it.
And we told you the story of the poor transgender teen in Connecticut who was in foster care and was locked up because she was being attacked by others. And they said, well, all we can do is put her in prison and in solitary confinement because, you know, other people react to her. And Harvey Firestein did a great op-ed for the New York Times on her case, and a really horrifying story. And I hope his attention to it will get some attention. And
as he catalyzed the whole movement against Russia's homophobia.
Note on that, the California Public Employees Pension Fund, CalPERS, biggest fund like that in the United States, has divested from its investments in 2 Russian companies that are running and own the website in Russia, the VK website, that posts all these videos from these neo-Nazis who lure and torture particularly young gay men with impunity. And so we've been trying to ask people who have investments in these companies to either challenge that website or divest, and the California pension system now has.
In Astoria, Oregon, our friend and viewer, out-gay counselor Drew Herzig, introduced an anti-discrimination policy. It's actually sparking some debate, even though this is a state that protects gay rights. I mean, but they also want to cover contractors who do business with the city.
Good. I would like to raise a question about the HRC Project One America campaign that they've started in the South. Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas. They told us how they had spent months working with local groups to get everyone on the same page and be sensitive to local concerns and all of this.
Get any black people?
That I don't know, but so far I would say they have almost no one, because they are advertising for a state director, a field organizer, and a faith organizer in each of these 3 states. They've hired no one except the one guy to run it.
I hate when those things come across like fundraising gimmicks rather than actual real work on the ground.
You know, if you're going to spend all this time getting this supposedly in place, how about getting the workers in place? Now you're advertising for these people?
Right.
Seems strange.
Michelle Obama spoke at Topeka High School for the 60th anniversary of Brown v. Board of Education and gave a shout out to the Who You Loves. About who you love. We're called the Who You Loves.
It's so, you know, Gulliver's Travel.
The New York Board of Immigration, in New York, the Board of Immigration Appeals wants to send a gay Latino immigrant with HIV back to Mexico, and that they're citing social advances there, including same-sex marriage in Mexico. And the legal groups are citing entrenched prejudice versus LGBT people and those with HIV, despite the progress. And they say that a person could face beatings, rape, murder, and are often ignored by the Mexico police, of course.
All of the above are true. Let us mourn the death of our friend Catherine Abate, who...
We have a picture of her.
Official in New York. I actually went to college with her. She held many political elected and appointed positions in New York. And
she was our state senator.
And a great straight friend of the LGBT community for many, many, many years. And
did a lot of health and AIDS work. So she has died in her mid-60s. Now, of course, she made a great run for Attorney General of the state of New York. She lost to Eliot Spitzer. And what Spitzer did is demagogued her because she had made a very you could call it a courageous AIDS vote, in the legislature. Spitzer wanted to pass a bill that said rape suspects need to be tested for HIV. It sounds really good to the public, except for the fact that it miseducates women that they need to get into prophylaxis for HIV, more about which later and all that stuff, immediately, within 48 hours of the rape, and don't worry about what that you can deal with that another time. And he attacked her on this, and he prevailed and became Attorney General and governor, and then off with Client 9, he became Client 9 and withdrew as governor.
Well, Catherine Abate was
one
of the really good people, and this is a sad loss.
Hey, what's going on with that new lesbian super PAC led by Cubs co-owner Laura Ricketts? What do you all want? Do you know about it?
Yes. What's your question?
No, there was a.
It's been in business for a couple of years. It endorses candidates. You know.
I thought there was something new about it. Pocatello.
Only that Laura Ricketts has taken over as the chair.
I see. Pocatello, Idaho, defeated a referendum against their gay rights law in the election that just took place.
A repeal referendum?
Yeah.
Good. And we're expecting another city in Mississippi to pass a gay rights bill. President Obama has made his 6th nomination of an out gay person as an ambassador. This time it's Ted Osius. He's a career foreign service officer.
There he is. He's holding the baby.
Yeah. And he is going to be nominated to be the ambassador to Vietnam. Yes, we're going to send a gay white man to Vietnam as ambassador.
Well, you know, I'll tell you, at least he's a career foreign service officer, which shows some respect for the country, as opposed to some of these big donors that they send, you know, for things. But he's an out gay guy, obviously.
And a little controversy in the gay sports world. We told you some months ago about a basketball player at the University of Massachusetts, Derek Gordon, who had come out. Well, the news of his coming out was leaked early by the Athlete Ally organization, which is an organization run by a straight guy, Hudson Taylor.
With a lot of gay people on their board.
Yes.
Including Chris Quinn and Brian Elner and all these people, right?
Well, Athlete Ally has now been sort of forced out of the LGBT Sports Coalition for having...
for not playing fair.
Exactly. And putting Derek Gordon in potential trouble by leaking the news early.
The right-wing group Judicial Watch did a FOIL request to the Department of Justice for all the information about Attorney General Eric Holder's collusion with homosexual activists and government employees, because he'd been at a Pride thing. And a judge just ruled recently that they didn't have a right to a lot of this stuff, and the employees have a right to privacy.
But on the other side of that coin, Charles Francis, the gay Republican leader, has been spending several years assembling an archive of materials on the government in the 50s trying to fire gay employees. And the New York Times did a big piece on it this week, and he's dug up a lot of stuff. But a lot of materials were destroyed by the government that didn't want it known how bad their actions were.
Well, Nixon said I should have burned the tapes.
Yes, he did.
And you can hold your nose and cover your ears while I do this, but it turns out if you're asked questions about your social and political views, you are far less tolerant if the room smells disgusting. It was conducted by a political science professor at the University of Arkansas, and that includes attitudes about us.
Last week, the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia was observed mostly around the world and not in the United States. But the United Nations put out a pretty good video about this. And if I'm not catching the control room too much by surprise, we'd like to take a look at that video from the United Nations.
Speaking up empowers us. It always has. We give voice to our ideas. We share our inspiration. And when enough people listen, it can change the world. But speaking up is never easy and has often been met with resistance. Right now, worldwide, millions of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and intersex people risk their freedom, safety, even their lives, just being who they are. But as people come to know individuals and their families, it becomes much more difficult to discriminate. In societies around the world, people have overcome hostility by opening up to those around them and having others speak up in support. Every person has a story, no matter how small it may seem. We are all the foundation for this movement for equality. So share your story. Speak up for LGBT equality. Change your world and inspire someone else to do the same.
Well, and the President and Secretary of State of the United States did speak about the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia.
Exactly. And in France, there's a new report that homophobic attacks are up since marriage was legalized. And part of that is because they had such a vociferous debate. Demonstrations by hundreds of thousands brought to Paris by right-wingers, and that stirred up a lot of ugly hatred. And
a lot of anti-Semitism there, too. In Gambia, President Yahya Jammeh has threatened to kill any citizen who cites persecution of LGBT people in seeking asylum. So you say, I'm coming from a bad country. He says, I'll kill you.
I think it's people who are leaving Gambia. He's going to kill them before they get out of there. In Kazakhstan, this almost sounds like a joke. Who was the character? Anti-gay activist built a brick wall in front of a gay club. Surely there's a back door.
Well, better news from Peru, where Congressman Carlos Bruce has come out. He's the first out member of Congress there, and he is the chief sponsor of the bill that allows same-sex unions.
And in Israel, they've updated their rules on gender reassignment. They'd been under a lot of pressure from the transgender community there. They've lowered the age from 21 to 18 that you can have reassignment surgery.
And have the time that you have to wait to, you have to live in the other gender, essentially, in order to get it.
In Taipei, Taiwan, activists are protesting for LGBT rights, and they held a very moving demonstration, reminiscent of old ACT UP demonstrations. Those are tombstones with the names of people who have committed suicide because of being attacked for being gay or have just been abused. One of them for Tyler Clementi. 100 paper tombstones with names erected outside the presidential office building.
You couldn't get away with that in Russia, where this week they banned an LGBT parade in honor of Eurovision winner Conchita Wurst.
But in Cyprus, they're holding their first Pride Festival. It's going to last for 2 weeks. They're having a parade in the capital of Nicosia.
Morocco? 6 men convicted of homosexuality face up to 3 years in prison in the central city of
Marrakesh.
Fisha Ben Salem. Arrests came after the father of one of them accused 5 others of coercing his son into committing deviant acts. And they're also convicted of prostitution and drunkenness, which again is just added on. The government thinks it had to have been for money because it couldn't have been for love or attraction. The Moroccan Association of Human Rights is calling for a repeal of that law.
There's a new president in Costa Rica, and for the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia, he raised the rainbow flag next to the Costa Rican flag on the presidential lawn. And I finally got to see God Loves Uganda on the Independent Lens series on PBS. It's repeating somewhat. Look for Independent Lens, God Loves Uganda.
Come over to my house. I have it on the DVR.
It was good. Depressing, but good.
And Idaho, on the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia, they did remind us that more than 2.7 billion live in countries where being gay is a crime, and death penalty in a bunch of countries, too.
All right, AIDS news. Well, the big news on the front page of the New York Times last week was that the Centers for Disease Control is officially recommending that people at risk for HIV infection take Truvada as prevention, a daily pill that if you take it regularly is believed to be pretty darn good at preventing HIV infection.
68 AIDS groups have praised the CDC for this move, and they think it's a big shift, and it could lead to a 50-fold increase in Truvada prescriptions. Gay men who take it, they say 99% protection from HIV.
CDC issued guidelines you can find on their website. Michael Weinstein of the AIDS Healthcare Foundation in California is still opposed to this. He's worried about people getting other infections that would be prevented if you used condoms.
Larry Kramer seems to be opposed to this.
Yeah, well, he thinks people are what? Cowards. For taking an antiviral pill.
You think women are cowards for taking a birth control pill instead of using condoms?
Strange.
In Connecticut, Lucy Cunningham McKinney, the wife of the late Republican Congressman Stuart McKinney, who died of AIDS in 1987, has died herself. She spearheaded the Stuart McKinney Foundation that fought for homeless people with HIV/AIDS.
She built a safe house in Westport for people with HIV and AIDS.
Amidst much controversy.
Yeah. But speaking of Larry Kramer, the film, finally, of his play The Normal Heart begins broadcasting on HBO this Sunday, the 25th. Ryan Murphy, the director, who's also the creator of Glee, an out gay man, says that it's 40% different from the play. You've seen it.
There are a lot of new scenes in it. Look, I love that play. I saw it when it was at 85 when it came out in the public theater.
Could be.
And of course the Broadway revival with Joe Mantello as Larry, and now it's Mark Ruffalo as well. We can just run it as B-roll here, or let people watch it.
This is the trailer from the movie.
Yeah, that's the trailer.
I've never seen or heard of anything like this. This seems to only be happening to gay men.
We have to do something. No one else will. Men do not naturally not love. They learn not to.
Ned Weeks, I spoke to you after the Times article.
I've seen over 300 patients. Where's this big mouth I hear you've got?
Big mouth a symptom?
No, it's a cure. You are all going to infect each other.
Let us speak!
It doesn't leave much to look forward to.
You're accusing the government of a conspiracy to murder all gay men?
Yes. Mr. Mayor, we need your help! Mr. Mayor!
Let's move somewhere far away.
Don't you dare stop for one single second what you're doing.
How are they going to help us if they don't know who we are?
They won't help us, Ned, if they do.
What happens to people who can't be as strong as you want them to be?
They're going to cancel our health insurance. They're going to put us into camps. They're going to quarantine us.
You can't stop fighting for the ones you love.
Of course, it wasn't just happening to gay men, but the fact that it did happen to gay men made it visible in a way that it wasn't in other populations, and that was the gift of the gay male community to the rest of the world.
I mean, of course, a lot of people look at this, and it does just focus on a small group of white gay men, mostly.
In New York.
In New York, who are concentrating on this. Larry takes a few liberties with history, including about the meeting in his own apartment where the doctor is telling, and people are heckling the doctor, I was there. You could have heard a pin drop. Yeah. People were so horrified about what we were learning, and we tried to get into action. Obviously, none of us did enough in the beginning. It also doesn't really acknowledge that there was a gay movement even practically before this. Yes, we weren't very powerful, but we were doing things while Larry and his friends were going to the beach. That's part of what's portrayed there. But this is basically a love story too, and Larry's love for gay people, basically.
In the end, should people watch it?
Oh yes, I think they should watch it, and I'll be curious as to what you have to say about it. Send us your comments. Lots of stars in it.
And on the flip side, on June 5th, there will be a celebration of National HIV/AIDS Long-Term Survivors Awareness Day. There's a website for that, national, NHALTSAD.org, and we celebrate the long-term survivors.
And a New York State Health Committee Senate Health Committee has approved medical marijuana. It still has to clear the full Senate there.
Entertainment news. We also have a trailer of a film opening this weekend in New York and in another couple of weeks in LA and around the country. Gore Vidal, the United States of Amnesia. Let's get a few seconds of gore.
God. I've done it again. Another camera crew.
Gore Vidal has seemed to have always had his finger on the pulse of American politics.
Vidal, as you probably know, has written some 22 novels, along with plays, movies, and essays.
Gore Vidal has been a thorn in the American establishment, of which he is, by birth at any rate, a charter member.
I don't think it's right to present Mr. Gore Vidal as a political commentator of any consequence. In the United States, 5% of the population have 20% of the income, and the bottom 20% have 5% of the income.
Islam, Judaism, Christianity are the three great evils that have befallen the world.
And the difference between a homosexual and a heterosexual is about the difference between somebody who has brown eyes and somebody who has blue eyes.
Who says so?
I say so.
His whole career as essayist, playwright, novelist comes down to one thing: the terrible discrepancy between the possibilities put forward by the Founding Fathers and the actual results of what we got.
The lies which our poor people have been exposed to in my lifetime are just beyond anything that you think reasonable people could accept. But they did. That is when I think I became instinctively a correctionist.
People say that a writer sees the future. He says that's not true. He says a writer doesn't see the future. A writer sees the present. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gore Vidal.
All right, let's get going.
Whenever I want to know what the United States is up to, I look into my own black heart.
All along, I think the most useful and creative people in the United States from the very beginning is the men who have said no. And many men have begun to say no again, and when the chorus gets loud enough, the people march.
Well,
that looks like a good one.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you to Mad Men for more gay storylines, men and women. RuPaul, on the end of the drag race this year, got a little defensive about drag and the criticisms he got. He did a history of drag. It's political. It's politically incorrect.
We had a governor of New York who did drag in colonial days.
Nathan Lane officiating the wedding of Mitch and Cam on Modern Family. And May 30th through July 6th, a huge National Queer Arts Festival in San Francisco, featuring in particular a play called Homophile about Sam Stewart, who we've talked about on this show, who was a fantastic
he cataloged every sexual experience he ever had on index cards.
And was a professor and a tattoo artist and a sexual rebel, Homophile, in San Francisco at the National Queer Arts Festival. And we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.